You know that feeling, I think we all know it, where the ground just feels liquid.
Right.
Like maybe you just lost a job. Or a relationship ends out of the blue on a Tuesday. Or you're just, looking at the news and it feels like the whole world is grinding its gears.
It's that feeling of being completely unmoored. The old maps don't work anymore.
Yeah.
But the new maps, they haven't been drawn yet. You're just floating.
Exactly, floating. And usually the advice is, push through it, get back to normal as fast as you possibly can. We treat that feeling like it's a bug.
But the research we're getting into today, it actually suggests that impulse, that rush back to solid ground might be the absolute worst move.
It could be the most dangerous move you can make.
Yeah.
So today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating, and I'll admit, slightly intimidating synthesis of anthropology, thermodynamics, and psychology.
It has a pretty heavy title.
It does. It's loosely called The Architecture of Liminality and Recursive Systems Integration.
Which is a mouthful.
It is a massive mouthful. But the mission here is huge. We're trying to figure out the physics of rupture when a system breaks.
And that system could be your own brain in a crisis or an entire civilization.
Right. What decides if it evolves into something stronger or if it just crashes and burns?
And the sources we're looking at say the answer isn't just luck. There's a structural law here, a specific mechanism that decides the outcome.
Before we get into the heavy stuff, though, we need to set the frame because the source material is really clear about this.
The non-dual approach.
The non-dual approach. And I think this is so important to hold on to. This isn't about order being good and chaos being bad.
Right. It's not a contest. Too much order and you get stagnation, tyranny, death.
Nothing can breathe.
Exactly. But too much chaos, you just get disintegration. Nothing holds together. So we're not trying to pick a winner.
We're looking at how a system integrates those two forces. It's about the architecture of the transition itself.
The space in between?
So let's look at the blueprints. This whole idea, it stands on the shoulders of some absolute giants. We are not starting from scratch.
No. This is a greatest hits of systems thinking. And to understand where we're going, we really have to start with the anthropologists.
Okay.
Specifically, the ones who studied rituals.
You're talking about Victor Turner and Arnold van Gennep.
Precisely. Van Gennep wrote The Rites of Passage way, way back in 1909. And he saw that cultures all over the world, they all used the exact same three-part structure for any big life change.
Separation, transition, and incorporation.
Right. But it was Turner, later in the 60s, who really zoomed in on that middle part, the transition. He called it the liminal phase.
From the Latin for threshold, right?
Exactly. The betwixt and between.
The messy middle.
And in a ritual, like a teenage initiation, this phase is incredibly intense. You are stripped of your name, your status, your clothes. You're sort of dead to the tribe for a while. You are a nobody.
Which sounds terrifying. Why would anyone design a process like that on purpose? We spend our lives building an identity and they just wipe it.
Because you can't rewrite the code while the program's still running. You have to shut it down. Turner's big insight was that you cannot transform without entering that ambiguity. If you cling to the old identity, if you refuse to be nobody, you can't become the new thing.
So the goo phase is a feature, not a bug. It makes me think of that thing about the caterpillar and the chrysalis.
Go on.
Well, it doesn't just, sprout wings. The caterpillar literally dissolves. It turns into this enzymatic soup. If you cut it open, there's no bug in there, just goo.
Exactly. But, and here's the key part, inside that goo are these things called imaginal cells. They hold the blueprint for the butterfly. The structure had to liquefy for them to build it.
Okay, so anthropology gives us the metaphor. You have to melt down to level up. But then the source material takes this hard left turn and connects all this to, what? Nobel Prize-winning physics.
It does, and this is where it really gets wild. We have to talk about Ilya Prigogine.
The order out of chaos guy.
That's him. Prigogine studied thermodynamics, specifically dissipative structures. These are systems that are far from equilibrium, just flooded with stress and energy.
So like a pot of water just before it boils, or a star before it goes supernova.
Or a society under extreme pressure, or a brain having a panic attack. The physics are the same. Prigogine found that when you push a system hard enough, it becomes unstable, starts to wobble, and then it hits what he called a bifurcation point.
A fork in the road.
A literal fork in the road. And at that point, the system faces a choice. It can either collapse, disintegrate into chaos, a lower complexity,
or
it can spontaneously reorganize at a higher level of complexity.
Wait, so the chaos, the stress, it actually fuels the upgrade?
It can, yes. The reorganization allows the system to dissipate all that energy more efficiently. It essentially evolves to handle the stress better. It gets smarter.
So let's connect this back. The liminal phase in a ritual, that moment when you're just goo, is basically a bifurcation point in physics.
Structurally, they are identical. They're both states of high instability where the old order is gone and the new one hasn't formed yet.
And then we have to layer on the psychology, because this isn't just about atoms, it's about anxiety.
Right. And that brings in Robert Kegan and his book, The Evolving Self. Kegan argues that human development, real maturity, it's not just learning new facts, it's a structural change in how we see the world. And that change requires what he calls disequilibrium.
Which is just a fancy word for feeling like you're losing your mind.
Pretty much. And Kegan says if we can't metabolize that feeling, if we can't sit with the confusion, we do what he calls defensive reorganization.
We contract.
We contract. We go backward to a simpler version of ourselves to protect the ego.
Okay, I think I'm seeing the pattern now. So anthropology says you have to enter the void. Physics says you have to fluctuate to evolve. And psychology says don't shrink from the confusion.
And that gets us to the absolute core thesis of this deep dive, the concept of recursive isomorphism.
Okay, there it is, the $10 phrase of the day. We need to unpack that. What does that actually mean?
It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty intuitive. Recursive just means a rule that repeats itself.
Okay.
And isomorphism means same shape. So the argument is that this pattern rupture, liminality reorganization, it creates the same shape at every single level of reality.
So you're saying the way a single neuron in my brain rewires itself has the same shape as the way a government collapses and reforms?
Structurally, yes. It's scale invariant. Whether you're zooming into a cell, a marriage crisis, or zooming out to the fall of the Roman Empire, the rules of transition are the same.
That is a bold claim. It sounds almost mystical.
It does, but think about the work of people like Stuart Kauffman or Benoit Mandelbrot with fractals.
Right.
A coastline has the same jagged shape whether you're looking from a satellite or with a magnifying glass. Complexity has a geometry.
Okay, so if this is some universal law, like a fractal of stress and change, why do some systems make the leap and others just fail? Because not every breakdown is a breakthrough. Sometimes things just break.
That is the million-dollar question. We see failures constantly. Joseph Tainter wrote about this, about the diminishing returns on complexity in societies.
And Peter Turchin's work on elite overproduction.
Exactly. Too many elites fighting for too few spots, the system destabilizes and collapses. Those are systems hitting a bifurcation point and failing the test.
So what's the variable? What is the difference between a breakdown and a breakthrough?
This is where our source material claims to add the missing layer. The thing that ties Prigogine to Kegan.
The hinge.
The hinge variable. The source calls it liminal tolerance.
Liminal tolerance.
Or sometimes the liminal interval. And the definitions are very specific. It's the capacity to remain in aporia without collapsing into simplification.
Aporia. That's a Greek term. It means something like a puzzle with no solution, right?
Right. It's a state of profound puzzlement, a paradox. It's that moment you realize option A is wrong, but option B is also wrong. Your entire map of the world just failed.
And our instinct, our biology, absolutely hates that moment.
We loathe it. The brain treats that kind of uncertainty like a physical threat. Your amygdala just lights up.
You want to close the loop now.
Immediately. You want to know who the bad guy is, what the answer is, and you wanted to know it 5 minutes ago.
So liminal tolerance is the ability to just override that panic, to sit in the goo.
It's the ability to hold the space. The insight is that the crisis itself, the rupture, it doesn't actually determine the outcome. Rupture is inevitable. Life breaks things. The outcome is determined by how long you can tolerate that interval before you rush to a conclusion.
Can you give me a more concrete example? Because holding the space can sound a bit abstract.
Sure. Think of an argument with a partner. They say something that really hurts you. That's the rupture. You're at a bifurcation point.
My first instinct is to snap back. You're wrong, or that's not fair, or you always do this.
Right. That is low liminal tolerance.
Right.
You felt the anxiety of the conflict, and you immediately collapsed it into a simple binary. I'm right, you're wrong.
You resolve the tension by shrinking the complexity.
You contract. Yes, we all do it. And that's the failure mode. The source calls it defensive identity. When that interval is lost, we replace integration with binaries, black and white, us and them.
It's just easier, isn't it? It's metabolically cheaper to think you're the enemy than it is to think, wow, this is really complex and painful and I don't know the answer yet.
Precisely. Nuance is expensive. It costs calories. The source uses this amazing analogy of a muscle cramp.
I loved this part.
When a muscle senses trauma, what does it do? It seizes up. It gets rigid to protect itself. But in doing so, it loses its entire range of motion. It becomes useless.
Hardened language is a cognitive muscle cramp.
That's the idea. So when we see intense political polarization, people just shouting slogans that don't really mean anything, refusing to listen,
Yeah.
that's a societal muscle cramp.
It's a system with zero liminal tolerance.
The anxiety is so high that everyone is rushing to the most rigid, simple identity they can find just to feel safe for a second. And this is where that non-dual frame comes back. We shouldn't see those people as bad. We should see a system under stress that is failing to hold complexity.
That is a much more helpful way to frame it. It takes the moral judgment out. It's not about being evil. It's that the capacity to sit with uncertainty has just collapsed.
Exactly.
So what does the success mode look like? If I'm in that argument, what does high liminal tolerance actually do?
It keeps the symbolic bandwidth open. That's the term the source uses.
Symbolic bandwidth.
It just means you don't shut down the input channels. You stand there in the aporia. You say, I am really hurt and I'm confused and I don't have the answer right now. And you just wait.
And the waiting allows new information to come in.
It allows the imaginal cells to connect. If you don't force a premature conclusion, the system can self-organize at that higher level Prigogine was talking about. You get a breakthrough, a new understanding that simply was not visible from the old perspective.
But you have to survive the waiting period.
And that's why the source calls this conscious maturity. It's not about being smarter. It's about having emotional stamina. Can you tolerate not having closure long enough for a deeper truth to emerge?
That completely reframes the whole idea of the messy middle.
Yeah.
We think of that time, between jobs or relationships as dead time. Like you're just waiting for life to start again.
Right. We think it's a mistake, a glitch.
But this suggests it's actually the workspace. It's the construction site.
It's the only place the construction happens. If you skip the liminal phase, you're just repainting the old house. You're not building a new one. You're just rearranging the furniture of your ego.
So I want to bring this back to you, the listener, because this can get very theoretical. But if this recursive isomorphism thing is real, then it applies to your Tuesday afternoon just as much as it applies to geopolitics.
Absolutely. To everything.
So if you are listening and you feel that wobble, if you're in the fog or stuck in a situation that makes no sense, the diagnostic here is to just check your reaction. Are you tightening up?
Ask yourself, am I rushing to an answer?
Mm-hmm.
Am I hardening my position? Am I trying to make things black and white just so the spinning will stop?
Because if you are, you might be blocking your own evolution. You're choosing the cramp over the movement.
And look, this isn't easy. The source is very clear that this is metabolically expensive. It takes real work to not know. It takes courage to be confused.
It takes courage to be confused. I really like that. It's the opposite of everything we're taught. We're taught confidence means having the answer.
But in a complex world, maybe real confidence is trusting you can survive not having the answer yet. It's trusting that if you hold the space, integration will happen.
We've covered a huge amount of ground today, from Turner's tribal rights through Prigogine's physics, all the way to the muscle cramps of the ego.
It all comes back to that one central idea.
Yeah.
The architecture of the transition.
Rupture leads to liminality. And liminality presents a choice. Collapse into rigidity or endure the tension and evolve.
Contraction or integration. That's the fundamental choice for any living system.
The source material ends with this idea that I just can't stop thinking about. It says if a system loses its liminal tolerance, then contraction becomes the attractor.
Gravity starts pulling everything towards smallness.
A death spiral. We get smaller and simpler and angrier.
We see that happening. But the reverse is also true. Integration can be an attractor too. The more you practice holding that space, the easier it gets.
So we want to leave you with a question today, something to just carry around this week. In your own life, at work, in a relationship, just in your own head, where are you faking certainty?
Where are you rushing to an answer just because the question itself feels too dangerous to leave open?
And the follow-up is, what would happen if you didn't? What new thing might be trying to form if you could just hold that space for a little bit longer?
Trust the soup.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.